Hello internet, at least the sane portion of the internet. It's nice to have you back again. Oh, there's a lot of fuckery in the world, isn't there? I don't advocate sticking our head in the sand and ignoring the craziness that's going on in the world around us, but sometimes it's nice to have a little safe haven away from the madness. And so hopefully this channel can offer a little slice of that. Today, I want to introduce you to a tool for music creation, or at least I think it can be used for music creation, utilizing the radio. I'm actually going to show you a web-based radio that we can access, and we can manually tune ourselves and get all this interesting sonic material that we can use to hopefully make some music with. So let's do that. So this is the website that I want to introduce you to. It is a wideband web SDR, and it's brought to you from the Faculty for Electrical Engineering, Mathematics and Computer Science from the University of Twente. I guess that's how that's pronounced. I'm going to pronounce this wrong, aren't I? Enschede? God, it'd help if I can spell, wouldn't it?
Enschede.
Okay, Enschede. Based at the University of Twente in Enschede. Oh God, what was it again?
Enschede.
So this is, based at the University of Twente in Enschede in the Netherlands. I'll just read you a quick bit of this. So it says, on this page you can listen to and control a shortwave radio receiver located at the Amateur Radio Club ETGD at the University of Twente. In contrast to other web-controlled receivers, this receiver can be tuned by multiple users simultaneously thanks to the use of software-defined radio. So let's just read this bit as well. The system is currently composed of a mini whip antenna, a home-built SDR board as pictured, which samples the entire shortwave spectrum and sends all of this via a gigabit Ethernet link to a PC, where a special version of the web SDR server software processes it. So there we go. That is the actual device, and this website allows us to control the frequency of the spectrum that we're listening to independently from other users. So let's just have a look. So this is the display. This shows us the entire spectrum. We can zoom in there. I didn't actually mean to do that then, but we can zoom in on a very particular band if we want to. We can change this layout. We've got this waterfall, which I think looks really nice, and we've got the spectrum. I don't like that as much. We can change the brightness and the contrast of this, and we can change the size of this, so we could have a much larger display on screen if we want. All right, we like it like that. Okay, so all right, I'm messing around with these controls, but what we're really here for is the audio. So when we first load the page, you'll get this little pop-up that says Start Audio. So we can click that and we will automatically be hearing one particular frequency from this radio receiver. There we go. And now what we can do, I'll tell you what, first things first, I'm going to turn the volume of this down a little bit, so it's a bit more in the background and you can hear what I'm saying. So I guess the first thing we've got is this little device here, this doodad, that we can move about to select the band of frequencies that we're listening to. Ooh. Okay, we have these different settings. So we've got USB that we're on by default. We've got AM, FM, AM sync.
Many countries are, helping the companies who are doing the AI related.
Oh, there, okay. We've got LSB, CW. I don't know what all of these stand for, but we can choose these different options that will presumably allow us to dial in and tune into slightly different signals. We have all of these other settings here. We can, the actual band pass that we're using to listen to, we can actually make it wider or narrower. We can do this sort of manually with these controls here. But it's a little bit finicky, so we can do it with a bit more control with these buttons. We could go really, really narrow, which gets rid of a lot of the noise, but we don't get as much detail. We do have these other options: noise reduction, auto notch, and squelch. I think that's my favourite, the squelch one. I'm not entirely sure what they do. And then probably the most important bit is this little button here, the audio recording. So the great thing about this is, as we're listening to this, we're receiving the audio signal the entire time, but we're not going to capture it unless we hit this button. So if you want to make a recording of what we're listening to so that we can use it later on for sound design or musical purposes, then we need to hit this button. So let's do that now. I'm going to open up the band pass a little bit and let's see what we can find. Let's zoom in a bit. So we're getting a little bit of music there and some talking by the sounds of it. So obviously we can pick up actual radio broadcasts. So one thing we do have to be careful about is if we do pick up a radio station that's playing music, that we're not infringing any copyright. But the great thing is that we pick up all of these other kind of textures and sounds. A lot of noise. So if you ever need a source for some interesting noise, so something other than white noise and pink noise and the like, if you want something that is a bit more varied, this is a great source for just collecting some different noise. But there's also a lot of just weird tones and textures. Now, I'm using the scroll wheel on my mouse to change the frequency in much finer increments. So this can be really useful if you really want to try and dial in on a particular sound. Let's try somewhere else in the frequency spectrum. And if we zoom in really far, it will actually tell us what or who is broadcasting on those particular frequencies, which is quite interesting. Okay, we've been recording for a little while. I'm just going to stop this audio recording, and as soon as we do that, it will give us this save option. So if we click that, it will immediately download it to our downloads folder, and we've got that recording to use later. Obviously we can see these areas of lighter colour, which kind of indicates where there is some activity. Doesn't always correspond to the most interesting sounds, but it should give us some kind of indication that something's happening. If we're in these much darker areas, it generally tends to just be noise. Let's try some of these different options. And let's start, let's start, I think I just downloaded that same one twice, never mind. Let's just start recording again. All these little bleeps and bloops are really good. Sometimes you get some really odd sounding vocals and voices that we can hear, these sort of ghostly garbled voices. Just like that.
Temperature -0.3 QNH 1000. Sun environment. Liquid 6 number 3. Validate 2 1
I think one of the most interesting and enjoyable aspects of this website is the kind of unexpected nature of what you might find. It's almost as if there is this vast array of hidden potential, all these untapped frequencies, and the fact that it's continually happening, and each moment is like a little snapshot in time that will never be repeated again. It kind of makes you feel a little bit like a detective scouring through these obscure frequencies. All these lovely bleeps and bloops. And I found that with some of these tones, if we use our scroll wheel, we can kind of almost play the tones. Not in a particularly musical way, but sometimes we get maybe just a very brief glimmer of a melodic hook, a little motif that is quite interesting. And sometimes these kind of things can just spark an idea for a track. All these sort of Morse code kind of bleeps. Yeah, that's quite interesting. Anyway, I think you get the idea. So what can we do with this? I'm going to jump over to Logic and I'm going to show you some of the ways that I've been processing these sounds. And so, I mean, the first thing that we would do maybe is just use the raw recording and chop out little bits and pieces that seem useful to us. That was cool. So yeah, I mean, we can just use the raw recordings as they are. Another way that I like to use them is to treat them as just source material for sound design, and then just add a whole bunch of effects basically and just kind of experiment with them. I've actually set up this chain, a rather large chain of plugins here with some smart controls to give me a lot of different variation and to make it playable. And I found this really good for making dronescape type things, but also glittery, twinkly sounds and lots of other interesting textures. So I'll bring in some of these plugins and kind of talk you through why I've put them in. So the first is the denoiser. Let's trim this a little bit, set our locators. So yeah, the first is this denoiser, which is not the greatest for reducing noise while preserving the sort of clean signal. There are a lot better tools out there these days, but it does give some strange artifacts, so I really like it, especially in a sound design situation. Then I've got a stereo delay for some delay goodness, and then various sort of compression and EQ. Then I'm using a filter bank. I've got some limiting there. I've got a tape delay, which I'm basically using to generate, with some sort of quite a lot of feedback, to generate an additional tone that we can shape in various ways. So that's really good for the sort of droney soundscapes. Anyway, yes, so that's the tape delay. Then I've got a pitch shifter, and this is adding a higher octave. This is in a dual mono state, so we're getting some stereo separation as well. We've actually got an octave amount here, and as I dial in the wet mix, we're also increasing the separation in the amount of sense, so it should hopefully make it feel a bit wider as we bring it in more EQ, more tape delay for some extra space and sheen, and some reverb as well. So that's all of the plugins. Now, because I'm using smart controls, I've set these up, and I will be making this available, by the way. I will make this channel strip setting available to you. I might tweak it a little bit more, but yeah, so we've got all these settings in the smart controls, so we can actually sort of play it and actually get some articulation, and just use the radio recordings as our just source material. Radio recordings as our for our explorations. So that's quite nice already. In fact, let's record what we're doing. That wasn't recording. Okay, we didn't have bus send on. Okay, let's try that one more time. The screen recording should have captured that hopefully anyway. So yeah, lovely things like that really. So that's one way that it's quite nice, because then we end up with just these lovely sorts of dronescape textures. Which we can then further process. And why these radio recordings lend themselves to it so well is because we get such a variety of different sounds. We've got this kind of noise. Sometimes we get low rumbles. Sometimes we get some very clear tones and these little snippets of vocals, some kind of human element. Sometimes it sounds robotic. You know, these kind of Morse code and little rhythmic blips and clicks. It gives a lot of good material, very dynamic and unpredictable. So it's a really good source material for doing this additional sound design processing. Okay, so I'll show you one other way that I've utilized these recordings in a track that I've been making, but before I do that, I just want to give you one more example of some sounds that I've generated using this channel strip setting and the smart controls. So these rather lovely, glittery, shimmery kind of sounds. Yeah, those kind of things. Very useful in different circumstances. Can be great to add an atmospheric intro or breakdown section to a track. We could turn one of these elements into an actual sample instrument. We could maybe do some granular processing. So there's a lot of mileage we can get out of these recordings, I think. So let me show you the track that I've been working on. Okay, so this is the track. It's not finished yet, and it's possibly on my short list to be added to a new Monolith album that I'm working towards completing. I'm not certain yet. Time will tell. But you heard a little bit of it at the top of this video. Let me just play you a little snippet of it here. So yeah, that's a bit of a taster for you. The main part of the recording that kind of sparked the idea for this track was this thing up here. Let me zoom in a bit. So let me just remove the processing. So a very simple, it almost sounds like an old school telephone dial tone or something like that. Just that sort of melodic movement was kind of what inspired the rest of the track. And with a bit of processing to that sound, with a bit of tremolo and some pitch shifting, I ended up with this sound as well. And with a bass line made out of it as well. And that sort of became the main riff idea, if you like. And obviously you may also have picked up on another bit of radio recording that I used, and that was for this sort of vocal element. I've added some processing to this as well. So all of these little vocal moments are quite useful just to throw into a track, just to spice it up. They're quite handy little sound candies, if you like. And I particularly like this one, just using it on the outro. I love that little bit at the end. Okay, and just quickly, I want to show you one other way that I like to use these kind of radio recordings, and in truth any kind of sample, and that is to process them to make some gnarly bass sounds and other weird effects. I'm going to just play you the raw recording before any of the effects have been added. So this particular recording has got a lot of bass frequencies and a lot of noise, and I think that would lend itself well to this kind of processing. And then I've got some different plugins here. I'm using Rift. I've got an auto filter doing some pretty crazy filtering. I've got this brand new plugin called Uzu, which is awesome. I don't know a lot about it, but it just sounds really cool. So, and then OTT, channel EQ and a compressor. Unfortunately, I can't really share this channel strip setting with you. Unless you have all of these same plugins, you're not going to be able to use it. It's kind of pointless, but I will share the results in the form of the samples that I record. So let's do one now and let's hear how this sounds. It doesn't want to stop. That's enough. Okay. I hope you'll agree that's quite a lot of fun. Some pretty crazy sounds in there. So yeah, that's another way that these can be useful. In truth, you could use pretty much anything as the source material. It will give different results, but with this kind of extreme processing, a lot of the time it's more about the plugins, but I thought I'd show it to you anyway. So thanks to everyone for watching. If you're new to the channel and you like this kind of content, I've got a lot of other different kinds of content as well, so why not consider subscribing and liking the video. You may find some other interesting morsels over on my channel, but for now I'm going to leave you. I do just want to let you know that the channel strip setting with the smart controls that I made in the previous example is available for download. I've also put together a sample pack, some of the raw recordings of this web-based radio that you can use if you don't actually want to go over onto that site and record your own. You can just download the sample pack and use the ones that I've already recorded. And I've also got some of the processed sounds that I've made as well, so the kind of dronescapes and other sound design efforts that I've come up with based on these radio recordings. So I hope you've enjoyed the video today and maybe learned something, and why not go and check out this website. I think it's really useful resource, and it's just quite interesting to poke around on and see what interesting morsels you can find. So yeah, I'll leave you with that one today, guys. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you again real soon. Take care. Over and out.